All right, guys, so we are 4 days away from an official reveal of the C8 Corvette ZR1 from Chevrolet themselves. But until then, let's go over everything we know. Let's go over some unofficial renderings of the car, some speculation. We're also going to get some sound clips of the car to kind of determine whether or not this thing's going to be a flat plane crank, a cross plane crank, twin turbocharged. We also have some spy shots detailing the new hood vent, as well as some different styled carbon fiber wheels, possibly. Let's talk about all of it right now. All right, guys, so like I said there in the beginning, we are only 4 days away from the official reveal, but depending on who you ask, we might not be getting that much information in 4 days. So on the 25th of July, this Thursday, we are set to get a reveal of the C8 Corvette ZR1, but some people are speculating that we might not get that much information. We might not actually even see the car this Thursday. We might only get some little bit of information that Chevy actually wants us to know. Either way, if I had to guess, on the 25th, we're going to find out for sure if this thing is in fact twin turbocharged, if it is in fact a flat plane or cross plane crank. I have a feeling we're going to know at least that much. I would hope that on the reveal of the car, we'll actually see the car as well, but like I said, some are speculating that that is not the case. Regardless of that information, we are going to talk about today some other spy shots that were recently put on the internet, and I thought they were pretty cool to show off because they really, you get a really clear view of that new hood vent or the new aerodynamics of the front end of the car. And you can see just how deep that vent actually is. So there is a good chance that if the frunk is still there, it is going to definitely be limited in space to some degree. You can see how deep that goes. And keep in mind that the air passing through the front center has to have a tunnel, a straight tunnel from the front center all the way up through that vent. So you can imagine how much of the frunk is going to be affected by that. And there's also another picture here that shows it more from the front end of the car, and you can see two very obvious body lines that really help to push the air out to the side of the car when it's coming through the center there. So this is definitely going to be a benefit for aerodynamics and potentially cooling, since it is entering through that new front center opened area where there is likely to be a radiator as well. Next, moving on, I also just recently put up a short on my YouTube channel that showed 3 different ZR1s testing out in Ohio. All 3 of the cars show a high wing setup, meaning they're probably the ZTK version of this car, but all of them have the exact same sound, and to me, it sounds like a flat plane crank. Now, I know I've said in the past that I believe this car was going to be a cross plane crank. I have actually heard from 2 different sources that I have that are very inside of GM, and both of them have never been wrong about information in the past, but both of them are telling me 2 different stories. One is saying a cross plane, and the other one is saying a flat plane crank. So I'm kind of confused as to what is going to end up happening here, but in this video, these definitely sound like a flat plane crank to me. Take a listen. Let me know what you think. Now, outside of it sounding like a flat plane crank, I also am just enamored with how gigantic that rear wing is. I mean, this ZTK setup on this particular ZR1 is going to be absolutely massive. Now, I've also heard from another source that the rear hatch area of the ZR1 is going to be totally redesigned. So the hatch area on the coupe that we get now with the glass that you can see through, that area there is going to be totally redesigned with the ZR1. That's why in this video, the coupes you can see are still completely covered up because they don't want to show off the new redesign yet. Now, this is another reason why it is possible we won't see the car on the 25th because of the new redesigns that Chevy isn't ready to share yet. With that said, there is speculation that the 2026 model year will also have some sort of interior redesign. Now, we've been hearing this rumor of a redesign on the interior for a couple years now. It was supposed to originally be with the 2025 model years, but that didn't happen, so now it's pushed off till the 2026. I'm not sure exactly how much credit that particular rumor has, but I figured I would mention it anyway, just in case we do see something that changes for the 2026 model year on the interior. Now, obviously, the rear hatch is covered up here on these ZR1s for a couple different reasons. Number one, there is a good chance that rear hatch area is redesigned, but number two, they don't want you looking through the glass and seeing any kind of twin turbos. Now, there was recently a leaked picture that supposedly showed what the turbo setup is going to look like on the new C8 ZR1. This was leaked a couple weeks ago, and to me, this looks pretty legit. The way that it's set up and all built right into the manifold like this tells me that GM is playing with some seriously low turbo lag setups, and of course they want to keep heat and everything to an absolute minimum, but what this particular design does is it utilizes the very little space that they're going to have right in that area. So putting this all in one unit like this is a great idea, especially whenever you look at the side cooling of the car and realize that a lot of those open ports on the rear of the car now could potentially put cool air right past the actual turbo housing. It looks like this is very likely the turbo setup that the car is going to have. Again, this is a leaked image, so there's no guarantee of its authenticity, but it does look pretty legit to me. Now, we've had a couple different teaser trailers posted by GM that all include some sort of blue, misty looking intros, and then having the car drive through that misty kind of intro kind of implies some sort of water possibly, or a lot of people have speculated maybe meth injection. So I think that might have something to do with something. I think we might see some sort of mist cooling on the actual turbocharger intercoolers in the front, or possibly meth injection to really push this thing over the edge. I'm not 100% sure on any of that, though. I just wanted to mention this as a possibility because it does show up in every one of GM's teasers, and it really makes you start to wonder why it would be so prevalent in those teasers if it didn't mean anything. In all of the teasers that Chevy has put out for the ZR1, the same theme, unthinkable speed, is being talked about. Now, there's a couple different things that they could be doing with this, and unthinkable could just, of course, be a form of advertising for them. But at the end of the day, if they're really sticking true to this, unthinkable speed most likely means that the car is going to have over a 200-mile-an-hour top speed. If you guys can remember back to the C7 ZR1, it had over a 200-mile-an-hour top speed, whereas the C7 Z06 did not. So I do believe the C8 ZR1 is going to hit over 200 miles an hour, and that could be all that the unthinkable speed means. But I also think that there's a couple different options here. It could, of course, imply some sort of meth injection like we were talking about, because that certainly would be something unthinkable or brand new to the Corvette lineup. There's never been a Corvette from factory that has had meth injection built into it. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's the way this is going to go, but it is a possibility. Whenever they're talking about unthinkable speed, you really can't discount much of anything. Like I said, I do believe that that means it's going to be over 200-mile-an-hour top speed, and it could end there. But at the same time, we are talking about the ZR1 with a giant wing, so there is a good possibility that either the wing or multiple parts of the car could be active aero inclined. So basically, when you're making a turn, the wing could turn with you. When you're hitting the brakes, the wing could flip forward to help use aerodynamics to assist your braking. Or it could be something a little more subtle where there's just a port that opens or closes on the left or right hand side of the car when you're turning left or right to really help aero push you to that direction. We have seen some spy shots of the car with ports on the rear hips in the rear hatch area that could easily be exactly that. The only reason I say that is because we've also seen a couple spy shots of the ZR1 that did not have those ports in the back. So it could be the difference between a ZTK and a non-ZTK performance car. One of them may have those ports for active handling or active aero to some degree, or the non-ZTK car may not have it at all. Again, this is purely speculation at this point, but it does bring up the question why some of these cars had those vents or ports on the rear when others did not. Now, moving on to some other parts of this car that don't make a whole lot of sense, and that is when we see a bunch of them testing together, some of them have the battery pack cooler in the front, and some of them don't. Now, this is most likely because we're seeing the Zora model tested with the ZR1, because they're also testing it right next to an SF90 to kind of be their performance benchmark. But at the same time, what if these are in fact all ZR1s And the option for a Zora package is going to be something you can just place a check mark beside. So basically you would get a ZR1 and you would have the option of adding the Zora package, which when you check that box, all that's doing is adding the E-Ray battery pack to the front end of the car while keeping everything else a ZR1. Now, again, this is just purely my speculation, so I do believe it is something that could potentially happen. And in my opinion, it would help a lot with keeping the brand and the performance variants less quote unquote watered down. So if we go through the entire list of cars that is likely to make it through the C8 Corvette performance lineup, there's quite a few. So we would start off with the Stingray. Then we have the E-Ray. Then we have a potential Grand Sport coming. Then we have the Z06. Then we have the ZR1. Then we have a Zora. I believe that the Zora could potentially be just a checkbox for the ZR1. It would keep things a little less muddied, in my opinion. It also makes a lot more sense why the Zora would be testing alongside the ZR1 while looking very similar to the ZR1 as well. Now, I've also heard from a couple different sources that the ZR1 is very likely to be a limited production car. So it's not going to be mass produced the way the Z06 or the E-Ray is currently. It is going to be a much more purposely production limited car. What that means is roughly 1,000 of them per year for the next 4 to 5 years. So there could be potentially less than 5,000 C8 Corvette ZR1s ever produced if this rumor is to be believed. Now, if that's the case, you can expect ridiculous markups on this car, even more ridiculous than they would be normally because the car is going to be severely limited. Again, that's just from a couple different rumors that I've heard. There's no guarantee on that particular information, but it does sound legit. GM is likely going to want to keep the ZR1 more limited than any of the other performance variants. Now, going into a little bit of the stuff that we do know for sure. The car is very, very, very likely to be twin turbocharged. The car is going to have an LT7 engine. It's already been out there in a couple different leaked pictures where the LT6 and LT7 both shared the same kind of box that the crate engine would be shipped in. Obviously, we know this car is going to be called a ZR1. We also know it's going to be a 2025 model year. There's been some emails sent out from GM to potential customers talking about the 2025 ZR1 directly from Chevrolet. So it is definitely going to be a 25 model year. Now, there was a lot of speculation in the beginning, a lot of people saying that they knew for a fact that this car was going to be a 2026. That obviously is not the case. Some of the spy shots we've seen earlier also confirm the tire sizes are going to be the same as they are on the C8 Corvette Z06. The tires used are likely to be the same. So the Sport Cup 2Rs on the high performance version, whereas they'll probably stick with the Sport 4S tires on the non-ZTK. Some other areas of information that we aren't sure about yet, and this one's kind of curious to me, is that we're not even sure where this car is going to be revealed. There's been a bunch of different speculation saying Miami, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Detroit. No one seems to know where this thing's actually going to happen, which is really, like I said, curious. Because you'd think by now we would know, because if there's going to be people invited to this launch or reveal, they kind of need to know where to go. So I'm thinking more and more that we're probably not going to actually see too much information. And a lot of this may actually just be a video that GM puts online just for us to see some of the reveal. But ultimately, it may not actually take place at a physical location. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you got a little bit of information out of this. Like I said, we are 4 days away from the official reveal. I just wanted to put this out and kind of go over everything that we know as of now and see what ends up changing. Because it really doesn't seem like GM wants us to know too much about this car before they reveal it officially. Anyway, guys, if you liked what you saw, please smash the thumbs up button. Stay tuned to the channel here for any of the more breaking information on the ZR1 because I'm going to be giving it to you just as I get it. Subscribe if you haven't yet so you don't miss anything, guys. And as always, stay obsessed.